Hey everyone, this is Ariel Adams of the blog To Watch. Today I'm speaking to Chris Hall, the senior watch editor at Mr. Porter. Mr. Porter is a large e-commerce platform specializing in luxury men's goods and watches. And this year, especially in 2021, they're starting a new initiative in collaboration with Watches and Wonders, where a lot of the watches being featured are immediately available for sale on Mr. Porter, which is very exciting because in the past, people would have to wait sometimes months before the watches that were just released were available for sale. So we're going to talk to Chris about some of the new releases, some of the watches, and some of how watches integrate with current fashion trends. Chris, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Chris, tell me, how do the watches that you've seen being released at Watches and Wonders relate to some of the current fashion trend in men's clothing?
I think there are some big trends that we see in the fashion industry that have run parallel to what we see in fine watchmaking as well. Obviously at Mr. Porter our aim is to sort of offer the best in class, a real unparalleled offering of products across all sectors that we operate in, and therefore, you know, it's quite obvious when you look at the whole big picture that we're seeing a real shift towards real investment pieces, real considered, timeless purchases. And then that might sound obvious in watchmaking, but we're seeing it with fine tailoring, we're seeing it with footwear, we're seeing it with jewelry, we're seeing it in a lot of areas, and that obviously rings true with a luxury watch. You know, it's a considered purchase. We know men spend several months considering a watch before they buy one with us, and that attitude really resonates across our entire audience. You know, it's a time when I think people are very, very concerned with, you know, choosing the best, making sure they spend wisely, and finding that real sort of craftsmanship, really getting involved with the product they're buying, researching it, understanding it, doing their homework, and really coming to the product fully informed. Something which really sort of is at the heart of what we try to offer at Mr. Porter is exclusivity, that which is hard to find elsewhere or impossible to find elsewhere. So we see great success with limited edition pieces, with exclusive pieces, and that's obviously, as you already alluded to, really significant when it comes to Watches and Wonders 2021, because we've got a great many of our watches that you're going to see shortly available from this week. We've been first to market, or we've got a sort of short exclusivity, and that's really important for our customers.
When you talk about consumers considering their purchases a little bit more, or going back to some of the basics or classics, could you give us a couple of examples from the fashion side that maybe could come to mind? Just be a little bit more specific with examples.
I guess when you look at maybe the most obvious example is tailoring, is suiting and formal wear, to try and be as considered as possible when they're looking at, okay, it's a Tom Ford suit, this is something that I'm really gonna treasure and get great wear out of, great use out of. It's, you know, you're buying the very best of the best, and like I say, our customer really just, you know, wants to learn about everything. They want to appreciate the heritage, the craftsmanship, the skill, the material that's being used, what it is that makes it a special garment or a jacket, or I don't know, classically made triple welted pair of, you know, men's brogues, for example. Understanding that there's technique there and there's craftsmanship and there is real passion for the product. And obviously, you know better than everyone, that's something we love in watchmaking as well. When you look at the hand finishing that goes into a finely finished movement, the design, everything is all about those fine points, those fine areas which elevate a product.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chris. Let's move on to the next question. Watches have a lot of technical features to them, or the movements feature stories related to engineering or performance, things that are sort of beyond the normal aesthetic approach that, of course, is very important in making a decision about something that you wear. Now, you've seen the new watches from Watches and Wonders, and many of them have deep technical stories. What are some of the watches that might otherwise be reserved for a hobbyist, but that you think also has a lot more mainstream appeal, maybe in how it works, or how it looks, or the story behind it?
Well, we see great mainstream appeal with our audience, in fact, from a lot of the high-end independent watch brands. And it's, it's worth remembering that Mr. Porter's been involved in representing those kind of brands for quite some time now. Comparatively speaking, we've been working with the likes of Resence, for example, for several years, and they're very popular with our customer base. And More recently, we've taken on H. Moser, just launching with us this week. This is the Endeavour Tourbillon Ox's Eye. Yeah, this is a technical piece. This is a fine watch from a really, really well-respected independent watchmaker, and tourbillon watchmaking demonstrates that kind of horological craft. And it's really well received by our mainstream audience because they're engaging with it, yes, on a stylistic level, but of course, as we said, on a horological level, they value what's gone into this. You might see that also with a great many of the brands we offer today, whether it's Vacheron Constantin or Beauvais or Rocher Dubuis. A Rocher Dubuis single flying tourbillon, all Poinçon de Genève certified. That's a serious piece of watchmaking. But as you say, it's not necessarily the case that that's only of appeal to. You said a sort of hardcore enthusiast audience. We see great appetite for that at Mr. Porter because this is a piece of statement style. This is a real sort of, a real piece of statement watchmaking.
Help explain some of the appeal of a complication like the tourbillon to the mainstream. Even if they don't necessarily understand the history behind it or what it's supposed to do, the visual experience of a tourbillon is quite animated. How might a mainstream enthusiast that just likes interesting, nice, high-end things sort of perceive the tourbillon?
I think if you're that kind of customer and you are interested in high-end watches and in something which demonstrates what a mechanical watch is all about, there are few ways which get you there so immediately and viscerally and visually as a tourbillon. Okay, it's big, it's impactful, it's visual, it's there, and it demonstrates in ways that you don't need to, as you say, you don't need to say, okay, we're going back to Abraham Louis Breguet to explain. It explains what it is that makes watchmaking so fine and so easy to appreciate from the point of view of, okay, this is fine craft. This is technical mastery of something that's on your wrist. It's expected to be worn and to keep ticking 24/7 potentially, and yet here it is. It's microns or fractions of a millimeter. You can see it at work. It's the whole thing brought to life, and I think everyone who's into watches can appreciate that sense of sort of theatre on the wrist, if you like. For me, that's the appeal. That's the sort of the showstopper element of it. And as you said, it can extend far beyond a sort of a horological audience that might be able to give you a chapter and verse on tourbillon construction.
That makes a lot of sense. I can see how anyone would appreciate it after you explain it like that. Materials this year are probably more important than ever in terms of trendiness and innovation. There's been a lot of experiment with not just different types of colors, but different types of materials. Which of these materials and colors are you personally the most intrigued to see this year?
Personally, and across our range, we've seen a huge amount of interest in brown watches. We've got the brown dial, for example, on our new Mont Blanc 1858 Geosphere. This is a limited piece. It is in bronze, which also taps into what you were just saying about materials being of great importance. We're moving past a time where your choices were steel or gold. Our customers are very interested to buy in ceramic or in bronze or in titanium or in any of the, even perhaps the newer approaches that watch brands are taking in working with these materials to enhance and augment them. You might, for example, look at gold watches and say, okay, but gold is the oldest material in the book, yet brands like Panerai with Gold Tech or IWC with Armor Gold, they've augmented it, they've improved it for the modern customer. And that's of great interest because these things have practical applications. To look at color in more detail, as you said, there's the brown, which obviously also has resonated with some of the sort of autumn-winter, fall-winter collections from brands like Loewe, Tom Ford, Balenciaga. But it's more probably appropriate to speak of a great variety in watchmaking of color across the board, particularly blues and greens. The last couple of years have seen a real proliferation of color on watch dials. We have a wonderful array of green dial pieces launching with us right now, including JLC's new Reverso in green with a green Casafagliano strap. This is one of my personal favorites, I don't mind saying. I think it's stunning. And these colors, these playing with shades, playing with finishes, playing with the sunburst dial you see here, all add something, all add a sense of versatility to a watch which at the end of the day is it's part of your personal style as much as it is part of your watch collection. It is something that you want to consider in the context of how you're wearing it and how it looks and how it wears. And I think having this choice on offer, it can only be a good thing for everyone. We have IWC, it's another great example, has been really at the forefront of offering customers great choice. We have the Pilot's chronograph here, new 41mm case with green dial again, but also available in blue, and a great step on from the times when your watch choices were black dial or white dial.
Thank you so much for that, and I totally agree with you. It's exciting to see such a proliferation of watches, like you said, in browns, in greens, and blues, as well as many other things. But looking down the road a little bit, you have your finger on the pulse in terms of men's fashion and trends and what consumers are doing, probably more so than a lot of the watch brands that you carry. Looking ahead, give some advice to those watch brands. What should they be looking out for that you see is happening in the area of men's fashion?
Well, it's very kind of you to say so. I think to the extent that I will give advice, the trends I think I would pick out are a real focus this year on sustainability and transparency. We see this probably most notably at Panerai this Watches and Wonders. They've launched a wonderful concept piece, their eLab ID, which makes great strides in terms of what you can do in watchmaking with recycled materials. Then there's eSteel coming to their regular collection, which makes that more approachable and attainable for today's buyer, right? But these are all ideas that will filter into the mainstream. And that adds to, how many brands these days that are making an effort with their product manufacturing and their overall story, Breitling or Ulysse Nardin or Chopard or IWC again. And this is a concern that I think definitely, speaks to the wider world around us. It speaks to the fashion world. It speaks to almost every inch of life I think you care to mention, but it is the number one thing that I'd say for the next few years of watchmaking will be a really dominant narrative. And it's exciting to see what's coming out now with some of the products, whether it's a strap made from sort of recycled paper, as IWC has recently launched, or the new Cartier tank, which I'm led to hear includes sort of fruit product, apple waste products, that kind of thing. It's really innovative. There's fishing waste, there's fishing net, reclaimed straps. There's all kinds of things going on in that field. So sustainability, definitely a big one there. I'd also say the sort of shifting norms, okay, a change in behavioral patterns, a change in how we buy and shop for clothing can definitely influence what's happening in watchmaking. We've seen this erosion of the defined boundaries between formal and casual wear, and that can also translate to how we look to wear our watches. It's no longer the case, I think, that you explicitly have your dress watch for certain situations and your stainless steel diver or chronograph for other situations. People are being a lot more flexible and creative, and that comes down to things like interchangeable straps, which we're seeing a great many of on this week's launches, for example. But it also comes down to attitudes and the way people think, I can be more expressive in my look. I can take that watch and wear it with this outfit. I can wear my Roger Dubuis with jeans and t-shirt if I fancy. I can wear my Reverso dressed down with suede jacket and chinos. It doesn't have to be something I think is for my tuxedo or my suit, my three-piece suit. So those would also be sort of big changes that I think will continue to have an impact on what's happening in the watch world. This idea that anything can be worn in any situation, and you can really sort of dress with confidence and express yourself and match your watch to how you're wearing your clothes, match your watch to your outfit.
Thank you. That's fantastically insightful. I want to go back to the notion of sustainability. Of course, it's very true that a lot of consumers today have more of a social context and a geopolitical context in terms of the things they buy, and everybody wants to live in a world that they feel the products they buy are responsibly made and responsibly grown and responsibly produced and sold. In terms of how the consumer perceives this, is this an emotional story, or is there becoming a visual element to sustainable items? Are sustainable things supposed to look a certain way, and do you see any type of clothing makers adding an aesthetic element to sustainability that consumers might latch on as being connected to this larger sustainability trend?
I think that's an interesting angle to consider, and obviously the considerations are when you make products out of new or reclaimed new materials that require different processes behind them. Sometimes the end results can inevitably appear different, but ultimately I think when you look at when you take it down to watchmaking for a minute, when you look at what's being produced, the aim is usually to be as close to the existing ideals on an aesthetic front as possible. If you're talking about recycled steel or gold or synthetic straps, I don't think there's a great sort of step on in terms of what the design end product resembles. And I think on a broader level, to answer the main question, I'd say people don't necessarily feel. I don't think people want a sustainable product to look different from another type of product. They want all their products potentially to be sustainable, and I think it's more that sense that this should be an underlying priority rather than a sort of another sort of dimension to be considered when making a purchase. So no, I think it's probably more likely that we'll see mainstream designs, main core collections, just increasingly including more sustainably sourced product, more sustainably produced product, without necessarily that also heralding sweeping changes to the design process.
That's very interesting. It certainly sounds like sustainability is more than a trend, but potentially a permanent part of how designers, watchmakers, and everyone related to luxury produces and conceives their products to begin with. Final question. Let's talk about what consumers are doing right now. Everyone is always interested in what are people interested in, what are people buying, what are people researching. What do you see as some of the current behavioral trends and what people are investigating and buying in terms of watches on Mr. Porter?
Well, we touched on it earlier, and it remains true to say people are very, very interested in the exclusivity that we can offer at Mr. Porter and the potential to own something that is either highly limited or just only sold in certain areas. So we had great success, for example, with a couple of pieces launched last year. Our Gégé Lecoutre Kingsman piece was a massive hit for us, and so was our collaboration with Vacheron Constantin on the 56-day date. These were big success stories for us. And really resonated with our market. And again, like we talked about earlier, they're another example of how the mainstream Mr. Porter watch consumer is just as interested in the things that drive, I think, a true horological connoisseur. In fact, in many cases, there is no distinction. Our customers are real connoisseurs of watchmaking. And across the board, it's about the choice and the variety. So we're trying to offer a best-in-class array of watchmaking, be that divers, watches, chronographs. It may not sound groundbreaking to say it, but there is a huge appetite for some of the new gold watches that are being released. I mean, I may take, for example, the Cartier Ballon Bleu, which is just launched in full 18 karat rose gold bracelet, which you can switch out, right? You can switch this out for alligator, but this is a real statement piece. And again, available with us right now, it's proving enormously popular. This kind of classic luxury, right back to what we were talking about, considered timeless investment pieces. These are the directions I see sort of real success in for us at the moment.
Thank you very much, Chris. Again, I am Ariel Adams of Blog to Watch, and we've been speaking with Mr. Chris Hall, who is the senior watch editor at Mr. Porter. You can see more at mrporter.com. Lots and lots of new watches from Watches and Wonders 2021 and more. Chris, thanks again.
Thank you very much.